Give me bitches.
Hello and greetings. Welcome to Wuchichuan, an investigative journey. I will be your host. My name is Dr. James Byron Aston. I've been a practitioner of the martial arts for over 39 years, most of which has been in Wuchichuan. I'd like to say a special thanks to all of my students and of course to my instructor, Master Perry, for starting me off on this journey. We're going to begin this journey with a look back into the history, kind of the annals of Chinese mythology, lore, the anecdotal, generational stories passed from one generation to the next, and also to point out what might be available to you on the World Wide Web, because Wuchichuan is an very old and very rare martial art form. But it's more than a martial art. It implies unity, it implies harmony, but it also talks about moving from like the root of all being. Wuchi, of course, is that which all things come and to that which all things return. So we've, in the martial arts community, have heard that Tai Chi emanates from Wuchi. Well, in essence, that's also true of all martial arts. The Wuchi system itself was designed essentially to be a core curriculum for all martial art mastery. It is usually considered to be both a brutal and sophisticated gentle art. To be brutal and gentle itself is often considered to be a paradox if they occur in the same entity, the same sentence, the same ideology. In fact, there is no paradox within Wuchi because from emptiness, all potentiality has the opportunity to manifest into actuality. Though Wuchi is mostly practiced on a global scale, the Kung Fu arts, the Wushu, if you will, is globally identified with China as a nation-state. Wuchi itself has no affiliation traditionally with nation-states themselves because it looks at the entire globe as a single unity of people without division. That being said, China is still the place where you find most Wuchi practitioners. I will go into some detail later on in this video explaining the different divisions or sects, S-E-C-T-S, of the different Wuchi schools. For now, suffice it to say that it is way older than even the Chinese culture. How old? I don't know. I've talked to some publishers and some philosophers, to include having had a student attend the Beijing University in China to investigate some of the details of the Wuchi or Wuchichuan history and the Wuchi philosophy. We do know that it is related to the concept of zero, and since Wuchichuan itself historically comes from an area of northern Iran near the Caucasus Mountains between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea, we know that there has been a lot of influence in the numerical systems and the philosophical systems of the entire Euro-Asian region. There are, in fact, considered, at least to my knowledge, 4 distinct sects of Wuchi. That is the Yimei, the Shaolin, Wudang, and Wandering. The Wandering sect is the sect that I personally belong to, although I do defer my training to the Wudang. When I need to go to the Mountaintop to train or to the temple to train, I retreat to the Wudang monastery in China. It is said that one only needs a single technique in order to teach and or learn all there is to learn from Wuchi. One technique is sufficient. Of all the sects or schools of Wuchi, the Yimei embraces this principle and this philosophy thoroughly. They have a very simple approach to Wuchi. They work on very, very simple and gross motor patterns and refine them over time. Their focus and emphasis is on the spiritual energy emerging from the body and producing whatever effect it needs to produce versus the survival-oriented combat training that the Wandering sect, for obvious reasons, we will go into later, is different in the sense that it includes many techniques to include wilderness survival skills. There's also the Shaolin Temple that included 18 halls of Lohan, which was preparatory training, and only the best and most adept of that school, or those schools, or excuse me, those halls were accepted into the inner training hall where Wuji was taught to the selected individuals from the Shaolin Temple. Wudang currently has Masters of Wuji training and teaching in the Wudang monasteries. Shaolin is more Buddhist influence, Wudang more Taoist influence, Wandering sect a little less influenced by any of the particular philosophies. Yimei I am less informed about, so I do not know what their primary philosophies are. It could very well be Confucian or Taoist, I'm not sure. But those are the 4 sects that I am currently aware of, and if anyone out there wants to email me or comment on this video to assist with this project, I'm definitely very open, since this is the first of its kind to my knowledge ever, since the founder of the Wudang monasteries, or the purported founder of the Wudang monasteries, Zhang Zhenfen, has actually written a Wuji manual that is currently under lock and key at the University of Beijing in China. Wuji historically has always been, and probably will still continue to be to some degree, a secretive art. It's not that we have anything that's special that anyone in the world could possibly learn. It's just, it's a commitment that the practitioners have to keeping the purity of the teachings passed from one generation to the next, from one individual practitioner to the next. It is my commitment to the next generation, my commitment to my students, that I will hold nothing back. I will not soften any of the blows. I will not refrain from giving them any of the teachings. It is always, and always has been, up to the student to be able to step up to meet the requirements of the teachings as they are taught. And sometimes that can be very harsh. Sparring, for example, is a harsh meditative training where one does not just flail their limbs about, but one stands absolutely perfectly still and moves only when required. That's difficult because people are flinging limbs and sticks and weapons at you, towards your face, towards your body and your limbs. And to hold still in absolute quietude and equanimity, to be at peace in the face of a violent onslaught, is something that is usually not for the faint of heart, if you will. As I mentioned earlier, myself and my students are part of what is called the Wandering sect, the Parivrajaka's in Sanskrit, meaning the wandering religious mendicant. And not so much religious, but that is kind of the more common popular term. And then in Japan, the Mudoka, or the licentious ones, is also what we're referred to, although we have established a modicum of respect among the traditional Japanese martial artists. That's a good thing, and many thanks to one of my close friends for that, as an emissary to the Japanese Wadokai Association and the Karate-Do Japanese Federation. So, with that in mind, we have to consider that the style that I'll be demonstrating for you is actually a Wuchichuan system, but it is one of the 4 sects, and we don't actually prize nor desire to have a house. For example, we're in the training hall that I use for inclement weather, when it's raining, when it's cold. Sometimes we train in the rain, sometimes we train in the freezing cold, the ice and the snow, but sometimes we need to sit inside, and that's okay too. It's fine to seek shelter. But for the most part, the Wandering sect promotes the unity not only with the social culture and the people, but also nature. Because as a natural philosophy, which is what Wuji really is, a natural philosophy, it emphasizes in our school the importance of connecting to natural principles and utilizing nature as our primary guide, if you will, to demonstrate or to give us examples of how these principles work in nature for real. Gravity is a perfect example. So, Modern times has presented a challenge for all of us. It has also provided us an opportunity, for example, via the internet, through the web, through YouTube, which you're watching right now. We in the martial arts of Wuchichuan specifically have been able to reach out, to put our names out there, to put videos out there, to post a website. We even have Grandmaster Chi Kim Tong from the Shaolin promoting Wuchi publicly. We also, on a website that Alan Tinian has promoted the Wuchi on, explains that the modern circumstance for the Wuchi warrior promotes a kind of unique problem. And that problem is life. I mean, it's the modern way of life. We have jobs, we have bills to pay, we have electricity to pay, we have mouths to feed, we have family to take care of, we have other loved ones, we have extended family, and these all require some attention from us. It's very difficult for an individual to extricate themselves entirely from that environment and move to a monastery, to move to a mountaintop, to move to the woods, to follow a teacher of Wuchichuan around as the traditional disciples would have for years, 14 to 20 years, literally, following them around, learning all there was to learn about the curriculum of Wuchi, about Wuchi principles and Wuchi philosophy. And lo and behold, geez, I don't know anybody who has that time. So Master Tong, or Chi Kim Tong, who now resides either in Germany or the UK, no longer lives in China. He said that he may not actually be able to teach all there is to teach in Wuchi to this generation. So he's committed himself to teaching it in parts to any and all comers. Now, I admire that. And I'm grateful that such a revered grandmaster such as himself would be willing to do that. And I'm also shocked. Traditionally, we would not do that. Even amongst my peers, the people that I know who are practitioners 40, 45 years, more so than myself, seniors to myself, they're still reluctant to open their doors to the public. Well, I'm not afraid. And I'm not saying that they are afraid. I just think that those who are willing and wanting to will gain something from this dialogue. And those who want to be critical and be divisive, if you will, like to a separatist, thinking that we are not all one, then they're more than welcome to continue partying on with their bad selves, because they can be however they want to be, and it doesn't affect us one way or the other. There's a school I have actually not yet visited, and I hope to in the near future, that resides in, I believe, Dallas, Texas. It's Wujido, W-U-J-I-D-O, martial arts, and you can find them on the internet. Dr. Harkins is a long-standing member of the martial arts community, well respected in his field, and he also is a practitioner and teacher of Wuchichuan. His history and his approach to how it's taught you can find on his website, just like you can find that information on my own website. But he says something that I'd like to quote, and it is to introduce Wuchichuan to the public in a way in which I think is most appropriate. So Siju Dr. Hawkins says, "The real secret of Wuchichuan is not so much in the physical movement itself, although that is important, but in the underlying principles of the internal shape of its form, the form of strategy, and the principles of articulation. These in themselves constitute an incredible potential of variations. Wuchichuan therefore represents a kind of wondrous, infinitely interesting possibility. So much so that I am at a loss to even describe it adequately." You can find that quote in an article on Wuchichuan on the Wujido website, and there's more to read from that, including a little bit of the history, which is not in contradiction to anything that I have said. So the takeaway from that website is something that I kind of want to emphasize today, is that Wuchi itself is in no means, by no way whatsoever, a compilation of other art forms. It is a mother art. in itself. Other art forms were extracted from the Wuchi systems. And that's something you can find from other Wuchi instructors, because we include soft forms, Nagel, Qigong, Weigong. We include the three differentiated stages of training. We've got everything from weapons, hand-to-hand combat, survival skills training, rolling, and what would be considered gymnastics. We have exercise philosophy as well, how to stay fit, how to be healthy, how to be long-lived, and also how to defend yourself against a barbarian attack, just in case. And before I forget, maybe even zombies, although I'm not expecting a zombie apocalypse. Seems to be very popular right now, but who knows? So the question really is, what is Wuchichuan? Wuji itself is often indicated by an empty circle. Wuji is another way of saying void, or without limit, or without complementary polar opposites, such as a ridgepole. Wu, in the Chinese characters, which I'll post up for you, is not ridgepole. So no extreme polarities. And what does that mean? Well, it means essentially that within Wu Qi, all things exist. That means all extremes, all balanced harmonies. Stagnation exists within Wu Qi. So it is a system that is all-inclusive. Now, from a novice perspective, how can you do everything? Well, that's because it's principle-based, it's not thing-based. So there's a difference between Li, what's called Li, and Shi. Li, principle, Shi, form. So there's a difference between principle and form that Wu Qi explores. How do things come into manifestation? How do they start to materialize into existence as a thing? Just like we actually explore coming from a Wu Qi posture, which later on in other videos we will go over the levels one at a time, levels 1 through 18, until you are ready to enter into true Wu Qi training. And levels 1 through 18 are preparatory levels, all very in depth. Wu Qi itself is extremely simple in its form, being void and empty, yet it is extremely numerous in its manifestations. It can be anything. For example, I've recently had a knee surgery after 4 other reconstructive surgeries, combination of wilderness parkour, falling out of trees, off of cliffs, into crevices, into rivers. Things happen. Unfortunately, we go bump, whether it's nighttime or daytime, and we get bumps and bruises, torn ligaments, torn cartilage, fractured ankles, etc. And it leaves us in a world where there is boundaries, limitations. There's walls, cliffs, gravity has a great deal of influence. What Wu Qi does is we actually look at all of these things and all the components, and we examine how a technique can be created. We examine how a technique can be of use. So we look at what is the outcome of function, and then it's basically reverse engineered into what technique will give you that function, or that functional outcome. So, Wuchichuan itself is comprised of several components. We break it up into 8 categories. Those 8 categories are the individual techniques, there's self-defense, there's sparring, there's meditation, there's weapons training, there is skills such as fire starting, rolling, gymnastics. There's skills such as reading and writing some of the ancient texts. Well, we're not writing the ancient texts, but we're reading from them, learning to translate the ideograms, these kind of characters, into meaningful images. Part of the reason that we do that is because an individual character carries more meaning behind it than words. For example, if you look over here on my chest and at this particular character, the Wu character in Chinese, Bu in Japanese, or for us, warrior, is all that simply means, is just an idea. And so if we look at a Wuji warrior, that means a person of integrity, an authentic being, willing and able to do what must be done when it must be done. That's simple. Above all else, if you think about the numerous amount of techniques the applications, the self-defense, the free sparring, the combative approach, the survival in the wilderness approach, survival in urban environments. If you think about all those combined, they're driven by principle. And Wuji, the Wuji system itself, is both real in the sense that it's really there. I mean, there is such a thing as zero-point energy. There is such a thing as the absence of existence in the quantum reality that we live in. And we look at the application of this philosophy into the real world, and we know that the philosophy itself has value because it has real-world application. It has real-world application from 5,000 years ago as much as it does today. Why? Because we're still living, breathing creatures that live on the same planet that we have always lived on. So, do we manifest it differently today? Well, yes, sure, of course we do. But is it the same as it has always been? Well, of course it is. It hasn't changed. Gravity still works the same way gravity has always worked. So, the lessons that we are to take away from Wuji is how can we, as individual warriors, warriors of integrity and authenticity, actually be able to walk with that integrity and authenticity in today's modern society. It poses a challenge that my students have often said. The mountaintop, living in the temple environment, is so much easier than living in what's called the marketplace for us. So you have the mountaintop and the marketplace. The marketplace is the hustle and bustle. It's like going to the mall, going to any one of the busiest malls in the United States and trying to maintain your center, to hold peace of mind. It's not an easy task. It's much easier if you extricate yourself from the hustle and bustle of the marketplace and sit in a meditative repose in a quiet little environment on top of a mountain. I've done both. Trust me, I love the mountaintop as much as the next guy. But the true test of the warrior's spirit is going to be within the marketplace. Within the marketplace itself. So the true test of a warrior is not how peaceful he can be in a peaceful environment, but it's how peaceful he can be in rush hour traffic, how peaceful they can be in the midst of Christmas holiday shopping. There, now that's a challenge. So if you want a modern challenge, a battlefield is easy comparatively. I fear more about shopping in New York City than anything else on the planet. And I've faced mountain lions, sharks, etc. Oh, and bears, oh my. So our journey is an exploration into the Wuji system itself. How do we create that kind of peace? How do we create an integrated and authentic warrior? A being who is not necessarily free of fear, but fearless in the sense that if they are filled with fear, they are willing to act and be courageous anyway. They'll do what's necessary, they're capable of doing what's necessary, they're trained to do what's necessary, and they are spiritually compassionate so that whatever they have to do will seek benefit for all involved. That's not an easy task. It's not about just punching and kicking. It is about harmonizing and actually integrating into harmony that already exists, because we don't have to create harmony, it already exists. What we have to do is integrate ourselves, our being, into the harmonious existence that's all around us. Many generations ago, the Wuji masters put together this curriculum. They put together the Wuji curriculum and spread it throughout the world through small individual groups, such as myself, and some of the other instructors you can find referenced on my website. If they want to talk to you, that's up to them. I'm speaking only for my school because one of the principles behind each Wuji school is that the head instructor, the senior, if you will, the senior practitioner within that school, it's their responsibility to maintain the sanctity and the integrity of their particular school and their particular art. And it is my vow, my entire life's mission, to pass these teachings on to the next generation. It's as simple as that. Wuji is a very complex philosophy that has a very simple way of seeing the world. And it is only complex because of the simplicity it allows it to be in so many different arenas. And it's able to manifest itself in so many different techniques or venues for that matter. So I would like to welcome you and congratulate you for joining me on this journey in exploring Wuchichuan from level 1 to level 18.